What is up, everybody? Today we are going to be making this with an SVG and JavaScript. Look how fun that is. What is up, everybody? Gary Simon here. So today we're going to be checking out a real specific effect that I've seen in the past. I never really knew how to pull it off, and I decided today I'm going to learn how to do that and then share it with you as well. So if we take a look at it again, as we can see, this line is just an SVG. The SVG element just consumes the entire screen, so I'll show you how to do that as well. And you can see it's just there's 2 points right here and there, and then depending on the mouse position, it is affecting this line. And if we go all the way off, we can see it snaps back into place, and I'll show you exactly how to do that as well. So the inspiration for this tutorial came from this particular Codepen article right here from Rachel Smith. I think this is actually old, from like 2016 or something, but you could do some really cool stuff. She shows you how to do this particular effect right here. And so this JavaScript's a little bit different than what we're doing, but the same idea is still right here by affecting a path by the mouse position. So check that out, and as always, make sure to subscribe, and let's get started. Now wait 1 second, you're about to watch me engage with a cool front-end development technique. Now maybe you're not very good with HTML, CSS, or JavaScript. If that's the case, make sure to check out the sponsor of this video, Scrimba.com, in their front-end developer career path. They've recently launched their front-end development career path, which is a collection of courses that cover HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and much, much more, as you see. It's over 75 hours of awesome content. There are hundreds of interactive coding challenges, and it's all geared towards helping you go from beginner to someone that's hireable as a front-end developer. So check out the first link in the description below to get 50% off. All right, so let's get started here. So I have not much happening, basically. I just have an index.html exclamation point enter here in Visual Studio Code. We're going to link up our CSS main.css file. Now I'm using Sass here, of course, although I didn't really have to. I don't think I used anything specific to Sass. But main.sass file, we want to watch that Sass, so you're going to need the live Sass compiler and also the live server extension there in the plugin section. And here we go. We can see it is completely blank. And let's close the welcome area out. And let's get started just with setting up first the SVG and then the necessary CSS to get things working, and then we'll hop into the JavaScript. So let's start out with the SVG element. Oop, we don't get autocomplete there. Thought we would. All right, so SVG, we're going to do a view box. All right, we're going to specify 0, 0, and then 500 and 500 by the width and height. And so this makes it a square by default. We want to put in, let's just leave that like this for now. And so what we're going to do now is have a path. D attribute equals M250 by 0. And I'm going to describe all of these in a second. Q250 by 250. And then 250 by 500. So these are a series of oh, this is self-closing tag, so let's do this. All right, so these are a series of XY coordinates, and there's 3 of them. All right, so think of this, however, as just a line with a beginning point, an XY. So this is 250 on the X-axis, and think of this based on a relation of a 500 by 500 square. And then think of this, so this is the starting point because we're just creating a line, all right, that goes from X, well, I shouldn't say X, Y, but from one point to another. So this is the first point, and then the final point right here is 250 on the X, and then 500 on the Y. So if you think about it, 250 on the X, 0 on the Y, we're starting up top in the middle of this square, and then we stay 250 on the X, and we come down 500. So we're going to have a line directly in the center of that 500 by 500 square. Now, what is this? All right, so this right here allows you to influence and create kind of like a curve based on the position of this X and Y axis. So I'll show you that a little bit more specifically. If we come over here, quadratic curve path SVG square. There's a pretty good, I'm not sure if this is it. Yeah. So think about like this. The starting point here is the first XY coordinates. This is the last XY coordinates, and then this is the middle, the control. And depending on where this is positioned in XY axis, it will create a curve in some way, shape, or form. All right, so let's go ahead and just save that. And by default, if we look at our thing, we don't see anything here. So if we have Control-Shift-I, and we go to Elements, and here we see our SVG view box, nothing's happening inside of it. So let's go to our main.sas file and set some stuff up real quickly. We're going to do body, margin 0. We're going to do a height of 100 viewport height. We're going to do a background of something pretty dark. So it's going to be 29, 29, 29. And then also display grid, place content center. What those two values do, I'm always using it. We're going to have an H1 element, and it's going to center it vertically and horizontally perfectly in the browser. Overflow hidden, you'll see why we add that a little bit later on. SVG display, let's do a background. Just blue for now. We want to see what happens. All right. What we need to do now is specify height, 100%, width, 100%. And here we go. We see this blue square in the center, but our goal for this particular effect is to get it to expand 100% of the width and the height of the browser, and also preserve the aspect ratio of whatever's inside of it. So how exactly would we do that? Well, let's go back here. Let's go to our HTML, and inside of our SVG, after the viewbox attribute, we're going to add another one called preserve aspect. Let me look at my reference code, make sure I get this correct. Ratio equals x mid y, so it's x mid and y mid meet. All right, let's see if that actually does anything. It does not at this point. However, we're not done just yet. I'm gonna describe exactly what's happening here in a second. For our SVG attribute, we're going to put in also position absolute, top 0, left 0, and also any margin. I'm not sure if it has the default margin. Let's put this here. And there we go. So now this is the SVG itself. It's completely filling up everything, but we can't see our path, right? So in order to see our path, we're going to take our path property, and just for reference, this is right here. So we're grabbing that, and we're going to put in stroke, and we'll put in, we'll just make it white for now, and put fill none. So if we save this, there we go. We see our line here in the middle. All right, and also, there we go. Okay. Now, what we want to do now in the next step, let's first, I don't want to use those colors. I was just doing it for, quick, to be quick. We don't want a background on this, and we want to make this one RGB 23800. It's a red, basically, and that's what we're going to work with. All right, so let's continue on from this point. So, you know what? I realize sometimes when it comes to video compression and you're working with reds and blacks and stuff, you can't see it that well. So just temporarily, we're going to make that white. All right. So I mentioned I would describe what's happening here. Preserve aspect ratio. Is that supposed to be a capital R? Probably is. All right. Basically, if we take a look here, this is a good little exclamation. So what this is saying, X mid, Y mid, and there's a bunch of different variations of that property. This means centering the view box region within the viewport region. All right, so you have your SVG view box, it's its own idea, and then you have the viewport, which is the browser background. Meet means scalar graphic until it meets the height and the width of our viewport. So it's a way to make your SVG, I guess you could say, fit within the viewport, because it's traditionally without this, it's very difficult. And if you ever mess with SVG as a beginner, this can be a very frustrating thing to figure out. So what we're going to do now is we could see the reason we don't have a curved line is because our control points, our X and Y, are centered pretty much. One's right in the center of this line on the X-axis, so you can see all three are 250, and then also this is in the middle of our Y, which goes from 0 to 500, and this is in 250. So if we change one of these values, like for instance we change this to 0, we'll see that we will now have a curved line, right? So if we change this to 250, we change this, no, let's change this to like 400. You'll see now that it's going to go the opposite direction. So now it's pushing it over this way. All right, and then you can even further play around with this, like this Y value. Let's change that to like 450. Now it should be like that. So the fact that we can now mess with these attributes means that we can tie into this with JavaScript and do things based on like the mouse and stuff like that. So that's what we're going to do. Let's go ahead and create just a bit of JavaScript here to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is let's put our script. Let's put in, let's create a path. We're going to get access to our path. Query selector path. All right. And then let's create an object that will hold the X and Y values of the mouse. So we're going to say let chords for coordinates equals x0, y0. All right, great. Now we're going to add a event listener on the entire document, and we're going to look for the mouse move. We're going to pass in the event, and then, by the way, just because we don't need these parentheses, because we only have one. All right, and then in here, we'll say chords.x, which we defined above, equals the event.clientX. All right, so that's one of the properties that's passed along when you're moving your mouse anywhere. All right, and then we'll take this, change this to Y, client Y. All right, so at this point, now what we can do is we can console log chords.x, for instance, just to make sure it's all working. And we go to console, and there we go. So this is just the x-axis going all the way from, in pixels, all the way to 1148, which is the width of this browser right now, or the viewport, all the way to 0. Same thing with the Y, it would work the same. So now that we have access to that, we can play around perhaps with this attribute right here, the control attribute. All right, so let's put in a function. So we'll call this function update chords. There we go. And we'll pass in our chords x, which is just this object right here. So let's create that function. So we'll say function update chords, and oops, I'm so used to putting like guitar chords, I spell that way all the time. So update chords, pass in the chords, and then what we could do is path.set attribute. All right, so which attribute do we want to set on the path element? It's the D. So we put D in the first parameter and then the actual attribute that we want. So here we can put in backticks, and we'll copy this and paste this in. And Right here, what we want to do is just put in our chords.x and chords.y. So you leave the queue and you put in chords.x and chords.y. Save it. It should work. And there we go. Look at that. It looks like a pregnant woman. Right there. Maybe she's like 6 months. Over here, she's like ready to pop. All right. It's very cool. It's not exactly accurate to the mouse position. It gets accurate over here. And that's just because right now it is setting the X in the, like, especially the X, it is setting the X to a value that right over here is a lot greater than 500, because remember this SVG here is 500 by 500. But because in this particular case, the width of the browser is like 1100 or 1200, it's not following the mouse very well, which is, it depends on your purpose. Maybe you don't want it to, but we could do a little bit of math to fix that up. Like if we took this browser in towards like what would be more like 500, it's going to follow it a little bit more closely. Okay, so now let's make some changes to this. What I want to do is first, let's get the actual, we want to do a little bit of math inside of our add event listener. And so what we'll do is we're going to create a property called width. Let's define it up here. Let width equal 0. And then inside of our event listener, we're going to say width equals chords.x divided by window.inner width. All right, so that's kind of the math I was talking about. We take the X position and divide it by the window.inner width. So what happens there? If we do console log width now, and we Control-Shift-I, you're going to see now, instead of going from a value from 0 to whatever the width is, we're going from a value of 0 all the way to 1. All right, and this will be useful in a second. So after that, oh, and by the way, you notice all those decimal points it was adding? So we could do console.log width to fixed, and this is how you specify the number of decimal points. And there we go. So you could have 2 or 3 or whatever, and you'll see how this comes into play in a second. So now what we'll do is in our update chords function, we're going to say our chords.x equals our width, and let's just leave it at that for a second. So now this is going to equal what this width is set at, and let's see what that does. All right, what's the problem here? Well, it's hardly moving, pretty much not moving at all, because it's only changing it from 0.0 all the way up to 1, but we have 500. So we can multiply this by 500, and that way it resets our values from 0 to 500 rather than 0 to like 1200 or whatever. And now the line is more symmetrical based on the position of the mouse. If you recall before, it was pushing it out way over here, but it didn't have much of an effect over here, at least for this viewport resolution. Okay. All right, so now how can we do something extra with this so that maybe it, maybe when you, the mouse is off the browser, it'll snap that line back, right? So that's basically making it elastic. Let's go ahead and, I'm sure we could do this without GSAP, but for this type of project, you'd probably be using GSAP anyhow. And so go to Google, type in GSAP 3CDN, copy the top one that shows up, and that is right here. All right, and then we're gonna get, yeah, actually, I don't think we have to put that. Yeah, never mind. So now what we'll do is we're going to add a document, add event listener on mouse out. And there's many ways you can do this sort of thing to create this elastic effect. I will put some tutorials in the YouTube description. And then we can say GSAP2. So we're not using an actual timeline. We don't need to for this particular use case. We get our path, and we're going to put in an attribute because we want to animate an attribute. And then we're going to put D. That is the attribute property. And then we want to put in, we want to set this because this is GSAP2. So on mouse out, the mouse is, or the x-axis is going to be obviously something that is not 250 by 250. And so we want to go back. We want to snap that line back to the original points. So we paste that right here. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So in order to get this to snap, let's see what happens here. Okay, so it's not very elastic, but it does kind of work. So what we want to do in order to get that bouncy effect is we put in right here ease. Let's get that away from there. And we're going to put elastic.easeOut.config 10.3, and you can play with those values. And if you go to Google and you type GSAP easings, you'll see where I got this information from. You can make it do a bunch of other things, but for the elastic effect, this is what we'll use. We'll save it. And there we go. All right, and so we can also put, now it doesn't work perfectly all the time. You know, if like we come in here, it might screw up, but it's pretty accurate. All right, very, very cool. So now let's get this consistent with what I showed you at the beginning. We want to put some text on top of it. We can put in H1, the wobbly 1. And then let me go to my reference code. We got, let's just do H1. We'll do font size 5 rem, so it's going to be kind of big. Pointer. I'm going to show you why I'm adding pointer in a second. We'll do color red. Font family is going to be Play Fair Display. I already have that installed on the machine. I'm not going to bother importing it at the top. Let's save this. That's what that looks like so far. Let me show you something interesting. If we want this to show up on top, let's take our SVG. It's already position absolute, so we can put a z-index of -1. So if we go back, now when we hover over this text right here, it's screwing up the effect, right? So if we just take our H1 and put pointer events none, you will see it now works. Awesome. All right, so let's continue on just by adding some other fun stuff. We'll put in, and before, we're gonna put content. We're gonna do like a type-based watermark. And then we'll put position absolute, a left of like 20, or a top of 20%, pushing it down 20%, also a left of like -10%. So it's gonna be like kind of off the screen a little bit. We'll do a font size of something huge, like 20 rem units. A color that's gonna be just slightly lighter than the background it's on. And z-index, we'll push it way back by -2. All right, there we go. Now this was originally supposed to be red. I'll just say red. That should work. And there we go. Awesome, awesome stuff. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that. I know I did. It's really fun just to learn interesting new interactive sort of effects that you can apply to your user interfaces in some way, shape, or form. So as always, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.